We are about to receive probably one of the strongest trap cards ever printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! A card that changes the way you look at traps and trap decks in general, and we're here to talk about exactly everything that you need to know, because there's a lot of it, about transaction rollback. But 1 second before we begin, I do have a very important announcement that the Sleeve Chief Black Friday end of the year sale is coming up starting on the 24th of November. There will be huge restocks of old favorite products, a lot of new things, oversleeves, deck boxes, and playmat, but most importantly, 20% off a lot of products, and on top of that, you can also use Galzo 5 to get an additional 5% off. So in total, tons of product with 25% discount, which is crazy. So maybe you've been saving up to pick up some accessories, and now you can do that for a quarter of the price slashed off. And of course, if you do use my code, just so you know, it really helps. It makes a big difference. So if you are shopping there, the link is going to be in the description below. We showed you some product, and of course, use my code GALZO5 to get 5% on top of your existing 20%. Let's kick this off. So we have a new set coming up at the beginning of the year, which is called Maze of Millennia. This is another set where the rares are commons, or actually the commons are rares, and we have collector's rares, stuff like that, similar to Maze of Memories, in which we got the Gate Guardian support. In that set, we're gonna have a few notable cards like Bonfire, which is a very good starter for Pyro decks, and Transaction Rollback, which is probably one of the most important cards printed in this set. So before we talk about how dangerous and toxic this card can get, let's just read over the effect and see what this card is all about. Transaction Rollback is a normal trap card that says, pay half your life points, then target one normal trap in your opponent's graveyard except Transaction Rollback. This effect becomes that normal trap effect when that card is activated. And you can banish this card from the graveyard and pay half your life points, then target one normal trap in your graveyard except Transaction Rollback. This effect becomes that normal traps effect when that card is activated. You can only use one Transaction Rollback effect per turn, and only once that turn. So there's two effects here, but there's only one effect that is relevant. Of course, the on-field effect targeting a trap card in your opponent's graveyard could potentially come up, but the graveyard effect is most importantly what you're going to be looking at, because it targets a trap in your graveyard, meaning you can send a trap to your graveyard and duplicate that effect without a lot of the restrictions that apply to it. And one more important ruling about this card is that the targeted normal trap must be a normal trap whose activation conditions are met at the time. However, you can also ignore the conditions of you can only activate one name of the trap card per turn, or you can only use this effect once per turn that are listed on that card. It only copies the effect of the card without a cost and without a once per turn, but it does apply the activation condition, and this is mainly what we need to pay attention to. So just to give you a sense of what this card can do, in example, in Labyrinth deck, you can send this card or discard this card with something like a furniture monster. Then you can copy the effect by paying half your life points of something like Big Welcome Labyrinth. And since it only copies the effect, it doesn't copy the name, it doesn't copy anything actually, you can activate a Big Welcome Labyrinth on the field, resolve it, and then in the graveyard, if you have Transaction Rollback, you can activate Transaction Rollback and just duplicate that effect, because it doesn't restrict you, it just makes the Transaction Rollback effect similar to the one of Welcome Labyrinth. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that, because there are a lot of cards that are extremely toxic that you can just send to the graveyard, not meet the cost for activating them, and then just resolve them and make it completely game breaking. So let's talk about the things that you can do with this card. So it's important to note that, for example, Harpy's Featherstorm is a very powerful trap card that has an activation condition of you need to be controlling a winged beast monster on the field in order to activate that effect. You cannot copy the effect of Featherstorm with Transaction Rollback because the activation condition has to be met. For example, if you want to copy the effect of Evenly Matched, you have to activate the effect of Transaction Rollback in the graveyard, targeting Evenly Matched at the end of the battle phase when your opponent controls more cards than you. And there's a difference between the activation condition and the cost of the card. So for example, a cost of a card would be tributing a monster for something like Eradicate or Epidemic Virus. You have to tribute a monster, a dark monster with 2500 attack or more, to activate the card, and that is the cost of activating it, while an activation condition, like we mentioned in Harpy's Featherstorm, is something that needs to exist in the game state on the field, whether it's phases or cards that are in play that you have to meet in order to activate it. So a cost would be a semicolon, and an activation condition would be a colon. This is how you tell the difference of whether you can actually activate it and meet the activation condition in order to resolve the effect of transaction rollback. So now that we've covered how you can use transaction rollback, let's talk a little bit about the applications. And first of all, the fact that it needs to target a trap card in the graveyard and then copy the effect. So what transaction rollback says, that it targets the trap card as cost, which means that if the trap card leaves the graveyard by an effect, returns to the hand, banished, something like that with the DD Crow, for example, transaction rollback will not be able to confirm that trap card's effect on resolution and therefore will not apply. So again, if you use a shuffler or something in response to transaction rollback targeting a trap card and you shuffle that trap card away, transaction rollback will not be able to copy the effect because the card is no longer there, because it needs to target for cost. And again, like we mentioned, the cost of the card can be ignored completely, but the activation condition needs to be met. Also, you can ignore once per turn clauses because, similar to something like Verti Anaconda, copying Red Eyes Fusion, it copies the effect that summons the monster, but it ignores the fact that it locks you out of summoning monster that turn completely. And it's also important to note that the transaction rollback graveyard effect copies activated effects on the field. So for example, Big Welcome Labyrinth, when it's activated on the field to summon a Labyrinth monster, that is something that you can copy, but you cannot copy the graveyard effect because that is not a trap card activating, this is just an effect of a trap card. So make sure you're aware it cannot copy graveyard effects of trap cards. And the coup de grace, the thing that we're all here for, what do you actually want to copy with this effect? So of course, as mentioned, you can do a whole bunch of things with this, but let's start off with the most powerful one, and this card is Ghost Meets Girl, a Masterful Mayakashi Shiranui Saga. Ghost Meets Girl, a Masterful Mayakashi Shiranui Saga is a normal trap card that says, tribute one Mayakashi or Shiranui Synchro or Link monster as cost. Again, we mentioned it in the beginning, you can ignore costs completely. This is not an activation condition, this is only a cost to activate the card. So after you attributed the Mayakashi or Shiranui Synchro or Link monster as cost, neither player can special summon monsters from the hand, deck, or extra deck for the rest of this turn. No need to read the other effect is a graveyard effect, but essentially, what this means is that you can send Ghost Meets Girl, a Mayakashi Masterful Shiranui Saga, to the graveyard from the deck, from the hand. You can use Beatrice, for example, to do that. And once you have that in the graveyard and you have transaction rollback there as well, you can activate the effect of rollback in the graveyard, target the Shiranui trap, and essentially because you can ignore the cost of the card, neither player can special summon monsters from the hand, deck, extra deck for the rest of the turn, essentially locking your opponent completely because you're going to be playing the next turn. You activate this on your opponent's turn, it doesn't really matter to you. So this trap is going to be on the radar to lock your opponent from playing because it's not that hard to get it. Yes, you can copy the effect because you can ignore the cost completely, and yes, this is toxic as hell. And another thing, the virus cards like Eradicator or Deck Devastation Virus tribute a dark monster for cost to activate the effect, right? Which means, based on what we learned, that you can do the exact same thing with any of the viruses in the graveyard. You don't even need to be playing a trap deck, you can be playing Fluenteries for all it matters, and if you can copy the effect of the virus in the graveyard without tributing anything for cost, you can resolve it and put your opponent under virus. And a lot of people have mentioned Harpy's Featherstorm, that again is a complete turn skip. You cannot use transaction rollback to activate the effect, to copy the effect of Harpy's Featherstorm in the graveyard if you do not control a Wind-Winged Beast monster on the field. You can do that only if you meet the activation condition. Might as well just activate it from the field. Same thing with a card called the 6 Shinobi. If you do not control 6 samurais with different attributes on the field, you cannot activate it and copy the effect with transaction rollback. So Rollback will probably be seeing play in a lot of decks. First of all, Labyrinth, it's a trap deck that has good graveyard access to send traps into the graveyard, whether it be something like Arias or, of course, all the furnitures that need to send an additional card to the graveyard. You get it there. You can then also, for example, set the rollback or set the trap you want. As long as you have it in the graveyard, you can just copy another effect of another trap card with transaction rollback. We're seeing it today in the OCG happening already. This card is at 3. And it's really, really powerful. And like we mentioned before, any deck that has access to Beatrice, so what you actually do with Beatrice, if you don't know, it's a rank 6 that sends detachable material, sends any card from the deck to the graveyard, which might actually get this card banned. You can send one of the trap cards on your turn, and then on your opponent's turn, you send the other one or the transaction rollback to copy the effect, and you can do this all in the draw phase. Now you have both traps, and you essentially locked your opponent from playing all together. So yeah, this is everything you need to know about transaction rollback. It's not an easy card to understand. I've been seeing a lot of misinformation spread about this card with things like the 6 Shinobi or Harpy's Featherstorm. Again, you have to meet activation conditions that are marked with a colon at the end of the sentence. But if you need to pay a cost to activate the card, which is marked by a semicolon at the end of the sentence, you can do that freely and you can copy the effect without paying the cost. Let me know what you guys think about this card in the comments below. We're going to be covering a lot of Maze of Millennia content later on in the channel. Don't forget, of course, the Black Friday sale on sleevechief.de. Make sure you check it out. Use my code in the description below to get 5% off on top of your 20% that you already get for this amazing sale. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.